Retroid has been refining their devices for quite a while now. They've also been seemingly refining their release schedule. Last year they released just the Retroid Pocket 4, albeit there were 2 models of varying specs. In 2022, they released a ton of different Retroid devices. There was the Retroid Pocket 3, 3 Plus, Flip, and the 2S. They were all released in short succession, and probably the worst offender was that the 3 and 3 Plus were released so close to each other that the 3 Plus pretty much immediately made the 3 obsolete. Well, now we're reaching the end of 2024 and Retroid has a new line of devices. There's the Retroid Pocket Mini and the Retroid Pocket 5. Today, we're going to take a look at the impossibly tiny Retroid Pocket Mini and see if it could be worth picking up.
What was that? Oh, I'm just hungry. It's a good thing I get CookUnity delivered weekly. These aren't just your old-fashioned microwavable dinners. These are artisan meals crafted by real chefs delivering gourmet dining straight to your home. There's no fuss or mess. You can handle washing a single plate and a single fork, right? There's no prep required. You can either throw these delicious meals into the microwave for a few minutes, or you can take slightly longer and throw it in the oven. When I'm highly invested in working or gaming, food is just not top of mind for me, and that's really where CookUnity comes in clutch. The cost of CookUnity meals are either less or equal to the groceries that you'd buy, but without the drag of standing in line for an hour to buy groceries. You just visit the CookUnity site every week to select your meals. There's hundreds of meals to choose from, and they all sound incredible. Sometimes it's honestly hard to narrow them down. You just pick out the ones that you're in the mood for, and then on your selected delivery day, your meals just magically appear at your doorstep. Meals taste just as good as they look. They're quick and easy to prep, and they're perfectly portioned. I know myself, and if I didn't have these insanely tasty meals waiting for me all the time, I'd just pick up my phone and order delivery. But CookUnity keeps me regimented, using their meals to keep me on track to avoiding costly fast food delivery. Plus, nothing's faster than just a few minutes in the microwave, right? So if you're interested in delicious, chef-crafted meals delivered straight to your door, you can go to cookunity.com/scattered50 for 50% off your first order. Or if you go to cookunity.com, use code scattered50 for 50% off your first order. Thanks to CookUnity for sponsoring today's video.
The Retroid Pocket Mini seems to take all of the generations of Retroid devices and refined this device to some really fantastic hardware design in such a tiny footprint of a device. The all-glass front feels very Ioneo coated and results in just a simply stunning design. This extends to the feel of the controls as well. We have the same analog sticks from the Retroid Pocket 2S and the Retroid Pocket 4, and these are still some of my favorite analog sticks. They have an incredible range of motion, and they're really smooth to use. The ABXY buttons feel really good, although they are on the smaller side and they can be a little noisy, but it doesn't bother me personally too much. We have a clicky D-pad that feels great and is very responsive even for diagonals. The start and select are on the top of the device on either side of the screen, and then at the bottom is our home button and the back button for Android controls. At the top side of the device, we have our triggers. Both sets feel great. The L1 and R1 are nice and easy to press and are very clicky. The L2 and R2 buttons are analog triggers, which feel really smooth and have a great range of motion, perfect for games that can make use of those analog triggers. Along the top of the device is also where we'll find a pretty sizable vent for active cooling, our volume rocker, and the power button. On the bottom of the device is a micro SD card slot to expand your storage, a 3.5mm headphone jack, and a USB-C port. The USB-C port is not only for charging, but also supports display out. The display out supports up to 1080p at 60Hz. The back of the device has some Retroid branding, some ventilation for cooling, and grips for ergonomics. Even though it's a fairly small device, it's still packed with some pretty impressive specs. That includes a 3.7-inch AMOLED screen with a resolution of 1280 by 960, a Snapdragon 865 processor, 6GB of RAM, 128GB of internal storage, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.1, and a 4000 mAh battery. The standout hardware is definitely this incredibly vivid AMOLED screen. It really pops with its 500 nits of peak brightness, And I don't even have the brightness turned up all the way, and it still looks great at 50%. The Retroid Pocket Mini comes in 5 different colorways: Saturn, Orange, 16-bit, Black, and SFC. I think the namings are a little bit weird. Saturn is, Sega Saturn themed. There's Orange and White. There's 16-bit, which is really Super Famicom style. There's Black, of course. And then they have this SFC, but I would really say this is more like original Famicom inspired. The Mini is $199 US, not including shipping, which I have to say, thank you Retroid for making the buying experience so easy. If you want the Retroid Pocket Mini, the only thing you need to decide is what color you want. There's no options for different specs. Now, you might have seen that orange colorway and thought, your device looks nothing like that. You're right. It seems that while Retroid is getting much better at the manufacturing process, I swear, every Retroid release is coupled with some random issue, and that seems to flow into the Retroid Pocket Mini. This time, the issue is that if you ordered the white/orange variant, whoops, it's gray and orange now. Some have taken a liking to this colorway, even dubbing it the Half-Life edition. I think it's a travesty that it won't be matching my Aya Neo slide though. The good news is that this manufacturing issue has been resolved, so if you do order the white/orange model moving forward, that's the color you'll get. If you did receive this ugly device, I think it's ugly. If you did receive this ugly device and you want to get a replacement, Retroid will get you the right colorway sent over. I think it's great that Retroid is standing behind their product, even offering compensation for anyone who is still choosing to keep this device. Turning on the device for the first time, we're treated to a setup wizard just like previous Retroid devices. I always like to highlight this first time setup because it's just so well refined. It takes out at least some of the complexity of setting up an Android device for the first time. After going through the setup wizard, we get a choice to either use the stock Android home screen or Retroid Launcher. I always start by using the Android home screen so I can install apps and get everything set up the way I want, then I'll go through and I'll do the Retroid Launcher later. The Retroid Pocket Mini has Google services enabled by default, so it's easy to simply launch the Google Play Store and install more apps and emulators. I do a mix of Google Play Store and going straight to the source for my APKs. For example, for Dolphin, I always like the latest and greatest build, and you can get the developer build straight from their website. But for other emulators like Drastic for Nintendo DS or PPSSPP Gold, I'll go through the Google Play Store. Retroid is always going the extra mile and includes some tweaks to Android to make sure you can get the best possible experience. Retroid always goes the extra mile and includes some tweaks to Android to make sure you can get the best possible experience. If you swipe down from the status bar, you'll find some quick controls. This is where we'll find toggles for performance mode, analog stick RGB, fan control, controller layout mapping, and analog trigger settings. For performance modes, we have the options between standard, performance, and high performance. Standard and performance won't activate the fans, but high performance will. These fans spinning up are pretty loud, although it doesn't bother me too much just considering how much more we'll be able to push the device. The analog stick RGB controls are really straightforward. You can choose between 7 presets and adjust the brightness. If you tap on Customize, not only do you have more nuanced control over the specific RGB color, but you can also customize each of the left and right analog sticks individually. Fan will give you a few specific options over fan speed. I prefer mine set to smart, so the fan isn't just constantly on full blast. The controller style toggle will allow you to force either Nintendo or Xbox button mapping. And the analog settings allow you to force the triggers to be detected as only digital, only analog, or both. There's actually even more settings if you open up the Settings app and scroll down to Handheld settings. In these handheld settings, you can do things like start the setup wizard again, factory reset your device, do some memory management, and also control some handheld settings for the video out feature. Whenever you launch a game that takes up the full screen, you'll also be able to access this overlay. Just swipe from the right to the left and reveal the overlay. This includes screen mapping for games that don't natively support controllers, an FPS overlay, and other quick options such as screen recording and screenshots. The Retroid Launcher has become one of my favorite launcher options, and that still remains true here. There are still some weird user experience issues that I hope they'll resolve one day, but overall, Retroid has clearly invested time in making this launcher very purposeful. Get yourself into a game as quickly as possible. Even if you're not planning to use the Retroid Launcher, I think going through its first time setup is well worth it. It makes it so that if you do decide to use it later, you can very easily get started with it. When you're in the launcher, at the bottom left there should be an option for emulation. This will take you to an emulator browser, and for the first time setup, this will be empty. Tap Setup, then tap Create ROM Folders. If you have a microSD card, you can select this as your storage location. In my case, I'm sticking with the internal storage option, so that's my only option. After tapping on this option, you'll have a new folder either at the root of your SD card or at the root of your internal storage. It will be named Retroid Pocket Games, and this is where you'll put all of your BIOS files and ROMs. Then tap on System, and you can either enable or disable specific consoles. Now with those consoles selected, you can tap on each one, tap on ROMs on the bottom left, then tap Add. You can then choose Default Internal Directory, or you can choose your SD card. This is the time saver, and we can repeat this for each system. Otherwise, if you don't do this, you'll have to navigate through every single system and manually find the folder yourself, and that's just a huge hassle. And I think that's actually my one main critique. I already told you where my ROM folder is because I opted for that Retroid launcher to create the folders for me. Now it should just automatically scan and add those games for me automatically. But then again, this is just a nitpick. In general, I really do love the simplicity of the launcher, at least after the first time setup. Now that we've got the Retroid Pocket Mini perfectly set up, let's see if this tiny device can handle what we throw at it. Basic systems, of course, will do just fine. I use RetroArch for these easy to emulate systems, and they work great. NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance are all great through the Retroid Pocket Mini through RetroArch. For PlayStation 1, I use DuckStation, and the experience is fantastic. You can upscale to 720p to get some really crisp graphics too. Nintendo 64 is the same. Great performance, and even some headway to apply custom textures to make your games look even better. PlayStation Portable is also fantastic. It can handle upscaling no problem, even on more difficult to emulate games. Nintendo DS, even though we have quite a small screen, it's pretty fun here too. You will have to make some concessions with how you handle screen layout, but you won't run into any performance issues. PlayStation 2 is actually very impressive on the Retroid Pocket Mini. Burnout 3 is a harder to emulate game, but I found it to perform really well as long as you have high performance mode enabled. Not every game will run perfectly, but from my testing, you'll get a lot of games running full speed. GameCube performance, to be completely honest, blew me away. I was not expecting to be able to run F-Zero GX at pretty much full speed. There are some dips here and there, but wow. This must be one of the smallest devices that can run GameCube games this well. Now we're quickly gonna head into the Nintendo Come Sue Me territory, but we'll do it anyway. Nintendo Switch won't necessarily handle big AAA games, but NES World Championships is kind of the perfect game for the Retroid Pocket Mini. I was even able to get Echoes of Wisdom up and running, although there were some pretty big graphical glitches and slowdowns at times. I tried out some Red Dead Redemption, and you can see tons of graphical glitches, followed by a crash pretty early in the game. And of course, emulation isn't the end of what we can play on a handheld like this. I did have some weirdness with some games though. I wanted to install Balatro from the Google Play Store, but for some reason it doesn't seem to be compatible. Luckily, there is an unofficial way to patch your PC copy of the game into an APK, so that's what I've got running here. The UI is definitely on the smaller side, but I'm too addicted to this game to care. Grand Theft Auto ports are another staple of Android gaming, at least for me, and San Andreas runs no problem. And then there's unofficial ports. And given that this device has lovingly been dubbed the Half-Life Retroid Pocket Mini, how could we not play some Half-Life on here? I'm sure there's plenty of other games to play around with and try, but I think this does demonstrate pretty well just how capable the Retroid Pocket Mini really is. What it comes down to is that simply, the Retroid Pocket Mini is an incredible device. It's tiny, easy to take around with you, and it's packed with a pretty impressive Snapdragon chipset that really shines with emulation. It's insane to think that we keep getting better GameCube and PlayStation 2 performance on these devices, and at the same time, the devices keep getting smaller. I'm a little bit disappointed that my Retroid Pocket Mini isn't quite the colorway I wanted, but hey, maybe that makes this a little bit more collectible. I'm also impressed that this device seemingly isn't held back by having only 6GB of RAM. The AMOLED screen and the bezel-less design makes this Retroid Pocket Mini one of the best designed devices from Retroid yet. In addition, the analog sticks and analog triggers are top tier. Retroid didn't hold back on the Retroid Pocket Mini, and you can tell. It's not quite the cheapest device at $200 though. It is worth considering that for just $20 more, you can get the Retroid Pocket 5. Yes, that device is a bit larger, but it also has 8GB of RAM. But I do think the Retroid Pocket Mini finds a pretty reasonable balance. It packs in so much power into something so impressively compact. If you're in the market for a 4x3 device capable of up to GameCube and PlayStation 2, I think you're going to be hard pressed to find something that stacks up this well in this category. The Retroid Pocket Mini is an easy recommendation, but if you're on the edge and not quite sure, I literally just got my Retroid Pocket 5 like yesterday, so we'll be taking a look at that one pretty soon. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future videos. Follow me on Twitch if you're into that stuff. And as much as I want to get through and continue playing Wind Waker on this device, I've just got so many devices in my backlog that I'm just going to have to move on to one of those, but we'll see you soon.